All right, today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue preparing for Hajj, but now the Hajj days are upon us. So we're not going to finish this book of Hajj before the pilgrims complete their Hajj this year. But inshallah, at least, hopefully, some of the information we put out early was beneficial for anyone who went this year. And then next week, we're still going to call this series Preparing for Hajj, although Hajj will be over for the year. Insha'Allah ta'ala. So we started talking about what is forbidden for the muhrim. We talked about the fact that the muhrim cannot wear stitched clothing if he's a male. And, and that includes gloves, even for females. A female can't wear gloves. She can wear stitched clothing, but not gloves. And the male can't wear gloves because he can't wear the stitched clothing or what's like the stitched clothing. And that the woman, the muhrimah, she cannot cover her face. We said her face and her hands, yes. She cannot cover her face, and she can't cover her hands. Yeah, I mean, she can't cover her face with something that touches her face, but she could hide her face with something that just drapes down and conceals her face without touching her face. And we said that the muhrim cannot grease his hair, or what's like greasing, like you can't put melted wax in there or something else. And this greasing the hair means the hair of the head and the face. The hair of the head and the face. Last time I said a mistake. I said if he doesn't have any hair on his jawbones, then he can grease his face. So that's not right. If he doesn't have any hair on his jawbones, yani if he has baby face, then he can grease his jawbones. He can grease his jawbones. But he still can't grease the hairs of his face, so his mustache or his eyebrows. So that's why the statement was too broad. He can't grease his face, but he can grease his jawbones. Just like if he didn't have any hair on his head, he could grease his bald head. And he can't shave his hair or remove it otherwise remove it, shave it, or remove it in some other way. And he can't remove his nails. Saying remove is broader than clip. Saying remove is broader than shave. And he can't perfume. And we gave details for all of those cases. Now we still want to mention the last few sins for the muhrim. And what can he do to get out of ihram so that these things won't be haram for him anymore? So the sixth prohibition for the muhrim is hunting or killing game. Hunting game or killing game. Yani even hunting it without killing it. Just hunting it and capturing it, that's haram, let alone killing it. And that's a consensus. And the Quran explicitly documents that. Allah says, وَحُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَرِّ مَا دُمْتُمْ حُرُمًا. It means forbidden for you is hunting the land animals as long as you are haram. Haram here means as long as you're a muhrim. You can call the muhrim haram. And you can call the one who's not a muhrim halal. So you could say, I am haram, meaning I am a muhrim. Or I am halal, meaning I'm not a muhrim. And it's also forbidden to even bother such an animal, like to chase it away from its place, or even to put your hand on it, or to threaten it or go after it, or any part of it, or to wound it. or to try to get its eggs, or its hair, or its feather, or its chick. And you cannot help someone else hunt such an animal, like by pointing to where it is. If you know that this person wants to hunt this animal, and even if the one who wants to hunt the animal is not a muhrim, you can't help him. It's not haram for him because he's not a muhrim, but you're muhrim, so you can't help. And the game we're talking about that you can't hunt or kill is the wild edible land animal. The wild edible land animal. Even a bird. Yani, in this case, a bird is counted as a land animal. So, by saying land animal, and that includes birds, we are excluding fish and the like, sea animals or water animals. It's permissible to fish while you are a muhrim. And even in the haram, and by saying it's edible, we are excluding what's inedible religiously. So there's no redemption uh, for killing an inedible wild land animal. In fact, it's recommended for the muhrim to kill some of them. Yani, whether you muhrim or not, it's recommended to kill some of such animals, even for a muhrim. And those are the harmful ones, like snakes and scorpions and mice and uh, vicious dog and a wolf and a lion and a bear and a nesr. Nesr, maybe nesr here means vulture. But I don't know if nesr here means also eagle. But it could mean eagle. First thing I understand from nesr is eagle. We can ask, inshallah, what's exactly to be sure. Yani, if you're not sure, I'm not sure what nasr means, then we can ask. And yani, some harmful bugs and wasps. Those, even the muhrim can kill them. And when we say it's wild, so you cannot, as a muhrim, hunt the edible wild land animal, we are excluding the domesticated animal. Even if the domesticated animal went wild, you can still get that one and slaughter it. Like, yeah, the sheep that went wild. Or like a chicken. It's not forbidden for the muhrim to slaughter a chicken. But anything that is originally considered game and it's edible and it's a land animal, then the muhrim cannot subject himself to it. Even if this one became uh, domesticated, even if it became domesticated, yani like an ostrich. And this includes an animal that's a hybrid, a crossbreed between uh, something that's domesticated and something that's wild. This crossbreed and it's edible land animal, then it's like a wild one, so the muhrim cannot hunt it or kill it. So that's the seventh prohibition. And the eighth out of 10 is to offer or yani, to propose or accept a marriage. To propose or accept a marriage. So it's forbidden for a muhrim to do a marriage contract for himself or for someone else, whether he's appointed or whether he has authority, yani authority without being appointed, whether he has an authority that's not dependent on being appointed, like the father of the daughter, the father of the girl, he has already the authority. He doesn't have to be appointed to give her away in marriage. Or the caliph, for example. Once he's the caliph, then khalas, you don't have to appoint him to give woman away in marriage. So then it means muhrim cannot get married and he cannot marry off someone, give someone in marriage. The muhrim cannot even appoint someone who's halal to do a marriage contract for him. And this is the consensus of the companions. Imam Muslim narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, لا ينكح المحرم لا ينكح المحرم ولا ينكح. It means the muhrim does not get married, nor does he give in marriage. And there's a narration that says, and he doesn't even uh, seek engagement. He doesn't even seek to get engaged. Getting engaged means having that woman's hand promised to you in marriage. She promises her hand to you in marriage, or her father conveys to you, or tells, he promises her hand to you. That's the engagement. But the engagement is disliked for the muhrim, not haram, disliked. And that's despite that the engagement came in the same hadith, that the muhrim does not get married, nor does he give someone in marriage. And in a narration of the hadith, nor does he get engaged. So getting married, that's haram and invalid. Giving in marriage, that's haram and invalid. As for getting engaged, it's disliked, it's not haram, even though it came in the same hadith. But because there's some other evidence that specifies that that part, even though it's in that one hadith, it has a different judgment. And the ninth prohibition for the muhrim is sexual intercourse. That means penetration in any way, which means for the glans penis to disappear into a private part, whether that's a front private part or a back private part, with a barrier or without a barrier, and whether the penetrated one is an animal or a human, and whether that human is a male or a female. And even if that female is his wife or his slave woman, or if she's just a stranger. So that covers everything. It's haram. And it's haram. And that's because Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. That means there is no rafath during the Hajj. And there is no major sin, there should not be. Do not commit major sin during the Hajj, nor argumentation or arguing during the Hajj. And the rafath is sexual intercourse, al-jima'. So the meaning of the ayah when it says wala rafath, there's no rafath during the Hajj means la tarfathu, la tarfuthu. Uh, I remember there's a dhamma on the fa. We can double check it, inshallah. So la rafath, the way it's worded is that it's statements. There's no rafath during the Hajj, but the intended meaning is a prohibition. It's like saying you shall not, but it's the way it's worded is a statement, but what's meant is a prohibition, which means don't do it. And if one of the spouses is a muhrim and the other one is halal, then it's not permissible for the one who's halal to allow the muhrim to have sexual intercourse. And the 10th prohibition for the muhrim is physical contact with desire. The intended meaning here is physical contact that's less than sexual intercourse, less than penetration. So that includes kissing, and it includes other uh, types of touching. This is forbidden even with the wife. Yani doing that with desire is forbidden even with the wife. So without the wife, with other than the wife, that is more so forbidden. And such contact, such physical contact, makes a redemption payment obligatory, even if the person does not ejaculate. Now, if he touches with a barrier, touching with desire, but with a barrier, that's haram and there's no redemption payment. And also, masturbating is forbidden without a redemption payment, unless the person ejaculates. And this is haram because if other things that lead to sexual intercourse are haram, such as fragrance and marriage contract, then these would be haram, such touching with desire. But Yani, it is understood here that contact, physical contact without desire is not haram. So, like if a man just touched his wife or held his wife's hand to help her get somewhere, or like this is not haram. And what's meant by desire is for the self to long for something and to be inclined towards it. So, those are the 10 prohibitions on the muhrim. You can review the other ones from the last lesson, inshallah ta'ala. And before we talk about such redemption payments, uh, we want to talk about how does the muhrim become halal so that he can once again do the things that became forbidden. Because those things that are forbidden on the muhrim are not usually forbidden. So he wants to be able to legalize those normally lawful things for himself again. So getting out of the state of ihram is called tahallul. Tahallul. The Hajj has two tahalluls. So tahallul, it has a tahallul awwal, a first one, and a tahallul thaniya or tahallul thanin, and a second one. A first tahallul and a second tahallul. So it's like two levels. If you do the first tahallul, if you do the first tahallul, some things that were haram for you will become halal, and still some things will remain haram. And then when you do the second tahallul, everything that was haram for you as a muhrim will become again halal. The first tahallul is by doing two out of three things. So there's three things you have to do to get completely out of ihram. And subhanallah, it's like there are four though. It's like there are four, but there are three. So let's see. That's how Hajj is, mashallah. It's like has so many overlapping things. There's three things you have to do to get out of ihram. And in order, yani completely, and to get out of, yani to do the first tahallul, you have to do two of those three things. Which are, what are the three things? The three things are the obligatory tawaf, throwing stones at the station called Jamratul Aqaba, and shaving or trimming. Those three things. If you do all three, then you completely got out of ihram. But there's something connected to the tawaf. That's why it's like four. So if you do two out of these three, you will have done the first tahallul. All three of them, they start at the midnight of Eid. Their time starts at the midnight of Eid. So you already know that the time for Arafah starts before the midnight of Eid. The time for Arafah starts even before the sun went down. Yani, all the way, we're going backwards, all the way up till when Dhuhr time starts, which is when the sun comes out of its zenith. So when the sun comes out of its zenith, Arafah starts. That's the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. The time for Arafah starts. That's Dhuhr time, then Asr time, then the sun goes down, that's Maghrib time, and that's the Eid night. And the night comes before the day. So when the day comes after that, that's going to be the Eid day. This Maghrib that just came in, that's the Eid night. And then you have Isha. And then the time for Arafah stops at Fajr time. The time of Arafah stops at Fajr time. So now this night here, which includes the time for Arafah, when the midnight comes in, that's when the time for Tawaf and throwing at Jamratul Aqaba and shaving and trimming start. And as you know, one of the integrals of Hajj is to do most of its integrals in order. So when the midnight of Eid comes, then the time starts for Tawaf, obligatory Tawaf. That's an integral. And the time starts for shaving or trimming. That's an integral. So you could do one of those before the other. And the time for throwing at Jamratul Aqaba, that's an obligation, that's not an integral. So if you do two of those three, then you will have done the first tahallul. By the first tahallul, all of the prohibitions of ihram will become halal except those pertaining to women. Except those pertaining to women. Siwa umurin nisa, except the matters pertaining to the women. Yani, that means marriage contract, sexual intercourse, and contact with desire, physical contact with desire. Those will stay haram until you completely get out of ihram, until you do the second tahallul, which is by doing all three of those things. And what's the fourth thing that I pointed to for you? The fourth thing that I pointed to for you is the sa'i, going between the two bases, between as-safa and al-marwa. You have to do the sa'i after the tawaf if you didn't already do a sa'i because you did the tawaf of arrival. If you didn't already do a sa'i because of doing the tawaf of arrival. In other words, like we said, tawaf makes sa'i permissible, whether it's an obligatory tawaf or a recommended one. So you could enter into the haram and just do your tawaf of arrival, which is a recommendation and not an obligation. But since you made tawaf, it would then be permissible for you to make sa'i, which is an integral. And you know that you have to do most of the integrals in order, not all of them. So it's possible to do the integrals, some of the integrals out of order. So it's possible that a person could have done a sa'i before the obligatory tawaf. So the sa'i is done now. And then he wants to get out of the state of ihram. He does two out of those three things to do the first tahallul, and then he does the third thing for the second tahallul. So if he already did sa'i because he did an optional tawaf, then he's done. But if he didn't do sa'i yet, then after he does that obligatory tawaf, he still has to do a sa'i. Then he'll be out of his ihram. Then all of the things that are haram on the muhrim will become halal for him again, including sexual intercourse. Even if he didn't throw at all the stoning stations, yani, this means it's possible for a person to get out of the state of ihram even before he completes throwing at all of these stoning stations. That means a person could be halal and he's still doing some of the rituals of Hajj, like throwing at stoning stations. And that's why in the hadith of the lady from the tribe of Khata'am, and she was a beautiful lady, and the Prophet ﷺ did not command her to cover her face, although his cousin was looking at her with it was impressed with her beauty. That's what came in the hadith. Although the Prophet's cousin was impressed with her beauty, so the Prophet had to turn his face away from her. The Prophet ﷺ did not command her to cover her face. So someone might say, that's not a proof that a woman doesn't have to cover her face because she was in a state of ihram. And the answer to that, one answer to that is that there's no evidence here that she was in a state of ihram. And in fact, this incident happened at the throwing stations. And it's possible that a person actually could have become halal by the time he's throwing at the throwing stations. So there's not a definitive evidence in the hadith that she was in a state of ihram so that she couldn't cover her face. And who made that argument? Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah. So slipped him there. He said she was in a state of ihram. There's no proof in the hadith that she was in a state of ihram. So even the masters, they could slip sometimes. Subhanallah. Yani, just so it's clear for you. Some people say a woman is obligated to cover her face. So then you say to her, how can she be obligated to cover her face? In Hajj, she has to uncover her face. They would say, yeah, in Hajj. But out of the Hajj and out of the prayer, she has to cover her face. Now that's a mistake. So then if it were said to them, how can you say she's obligated to cover her face when the Prophet ﷺ didn't command the lady from the tribe of Khafa'am to cover her face in that hadith, when instead of telling her to cover her face, he turned his cousin's face away from her? So some of them say, well, she was in a state of Ihram, so that's not a proof that she doesn't have to cover her face. She couldn't cover her face. She was in a state of Ihram. So one response to that is that there's no evidence in the hadith that she was in a state of ihram. In fact, it's possible that she was halal. It's not even unlikely that she was halal during this incident, because that was during that was at the stations of stoning the stations. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. Any question? Ameen wa fikum. Yeah, he slipped because he made an argument that's not binding. Yeah, he said she's in a state of ihram. That's right. When he commented on the hadith. Yani, he said that this is proof that the woman doesn't have to cover her face. He said, but there's something disputable here because she was in a state of ihram. So it would be said to him, no, because there's no evidence that she was in a state of ihram here. What would some people say? They would say, that's Ibn Hajar, who are you? So I'm just a person who's using the rules. Because their tactic to argue with us, to argue with the students of the Sheikh, is to say, Fulan's a scholar and you're a nobody, so you have nothing to say here. So know that tactic. And you just stick to the proofs. Say, la, even if he is Fulan, he is ala rasi wal ayn, but still doesn't have the evidence here. The evidence is against what he is saying. Ameen wa iyyakum. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. He said, can I please repeat the first tahallul? Yes, the first tahallul is by doing 2 out of the 3 things that we mentioned. What are the 3 things? Obligatory tawaf, which is an integral. Shaving or trimming, which is an integral. And throwing stones at Jamratul Aqaba, which is an obligation that's not an integral. Do 2 of those 3, and that will be the first tahallul. Do all 3, and also with the sa'i that goes along with the tawaf, then you will have done both tahalluls. Is that clear? Ameen wa fikum. This chapter of Hajj is a special one for someone who wants to understand fiqh. When you learn fiqh, right, there's one aspect, which is you're learning the rules, how to make Hajj, how to fast, how to pray. Okay. There's another aspect, though, which is tracking the rules. There's rules here. Not just the judgment, but there's rules in the fiqh. So Hajj is like, in my own mind, Hajj is like a Rubik's Cube. Or Hajj is like Transformer. Has so many moving parts that fit together. Yani, when I think about the chapter of Hajj, I say to myself, there's no way a human being even could make up this. How could a human being, if you learned chapter of Hajj with enough details from beginning to end, how could a human being come up with this? He can't. Rather, Prophet Muhammad just conveyed, alayhi salatu wassalam, Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.